the Secretary of Energy, Granholm, she is responsible for this area of regulatory matters. And last year, she was testifying in front of the Senate. The highly regarded senator from Massachusetts, Senator Elizabeth Warren, she was grilling Secretary Granholm on when she was going to start collecting data from Bitcoin miners.
Secretary Granholm, when you came before this committee last year, I asked you if the federal government knew how many crypto miners are operating in the United States and how much energy they're consuming. And you said that wasn't being tracked and that more data would be needed. So here we are, a year later. Is the Department of Energy formally tracking crypto miners yet?
Great. First of all, thank you so much for your leadership in this, because I do think that you have unearthed a massive problem. And so we don't know how many miners there are. We don't know where they are. All of them, I mean, some of them you do, but many of them you don't. A lot of them are just underground. Some of them are small operators. So, as you and I have discussed, we have charged our Energy Information Administration with figuring out how to mandate a reporting of these entities. Now, that's complicated, as you know, because many of them are underground. And even the utilities may not know where the draw is coming from.
When was she going to send the form out and the survey? And that she had asked, Elizabeth Warren had asked Secretary Granholm to do this a year before. So this would be in 2022 that she was asked to do this. And Secretary Granholm was, I'll say that she did not seem to view this as an emergency at all. So
let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Given that crypto mining undermines all of our other climate work, we can't afford to delay on this. There's a lot of urgency around this. So I want to talk for just a second about the authority you have to gather information on this. Let me ask Secretary Granholm, do you have the authority to mandate that crypto miners disclose information about their energy consumption?
We have the mandate authority.
Her response was that before we can create the form, before we can create the survey, we need to get survey data. It's very circular. We need to get survey data from another form that is currently being filled out by people, that's going to be compiled, and then we'll be able to create the next form.
So in your response to a letter I sent you in February, you indicated that the Energy Information Administration will first need to develop a new survey program to begin collecting information from crypto miners. By when do you expect to field this survey and use it to gather data from crypto miners on a mandatory basis?
Yeah, we first of all are looking at creating the survey from a regular report that is an electricity gathering report that we have now asked to include crypto as part of it. That report from NREL will be completed by the end of this year, on which the Energy Information Administration can base its survey. So it's going to take some time for them to be able to craft the survey from the information that they receive from the NREL report, but know that that is happening, and we are pushing to accelerate the timelines because it is.
So by the end of this year, you will have a report on mandatory reporting,
We'll have
I want to make sure I know what we're getting.
We'll have a report that will have gathered, not fully, but enough information to be able to craft the framework for the survey.
And Elizabeth Warren's like, okay, but are you telling me this is going to be in 2024? And Secretary Granholm was like, well, I hope so. And Senator Warren looks just enraged. She's like, I'm going to hold you to it. You got to get it out.
So we won't be able to get the survey out, the mandatory survey, by the end of this year, but we will have the report done, and the survey will be constructed from that.
Okay, and we are certain we're going to get that mandatory survey out then sometime in 2024?
I hope so, but I don't want to...
TikTok.
And she's like, this is an emergency because of the climate. This is the climate emergency.
I mean, look, we're running out of time here. Crypto mining's energy use truly undermines our efforts to fight climate change, and we are out of time. We need to understand the full scope of the problem, and that starts with the authorities you have. So I hope that the next time we come back, you will tell me that you now have that survey in place, and we are getting mandatory reporting from the crypto mining companies.
I hope so, too.
Going to hold you to it.
And that seems rather irrelevant to me, but I guess she thought that was relevant to whether this form comes out or not. And so then we don't hear about it for 9 months, right? And then in January of this year, the EIA administrator, D. Corollas, and I looked at it into his background. I would actually get along really well with this guy. He writes Python code. I love Python. He's into data and SQL. So am I. I think that we'd nerd out on energy data all day long. But unfortunately, that's just not that's not what God put him on earth to do. So he sends a letter to the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, OIRA. And these guys are the form gatekeepers. So they're the ones that are tasked with evaluating literally every single form in the federal government has to go through this team, and they will tell you if your form is, valid or invalid. They're a form node, right? They're a full form node, is what OIRA is. And so he sends a letter saying, hey, there's an emergency. Now, his justification for the emergency is that the Bitcoin price went up, which to me is hilarious. This is the first time in American history that we've had a government official declare a federal emergency because the Bitcoin price went up 50% at the time. Now it's up 100%. So I don't know if the emergency got worse or not, because can you really, if the emergency goes from 0 to 0, it doesn't really get worse. So I guess we're continuing the non-emergency situation here. And basically his judgment was that if the Bitcoin price pumps, then there's going to be more Bitcoin mining, and Bitcoin mining is already 1 to 2% of the grid, which, I mean, I think that's actually pretty accurate, 1 to 2% of the grid in the United States. So huge congratulations to the Bitcoin mining industry. This is a tremendous accomplishment. And I would hope that the Department of Energy would give us an award, a trophy saying, hey, like, congratulations on being the fastest growing load in the United States. This is a huge accomplishment from an electrical engineering perspective, and it enables the nation to be a leader in Bitcoin mining, which is really awesome. But I don't think they see it that way. They see it as, they're growing so rapidly, and if the Bitcoin price is going up, they're going to grow even faster. Now, there's not really any evidence showing that the Bitcoin price going up has led to a substantial increase in Bitcoin mining in the United States, because it takes years to get the permits. You have to get permits to develop a Bitcoin mining facility. The facility, our Corsicana facility, has been in the works for at least a couple of years. You've got to get approval from ERCOT, the grid, right? You've got to get approval from the environmental department here in Texas. You've got, there's a long list of approvals you've got to get. And on top of that, you have to have the capital to do it. And, you have to have a long-term vision for Bitcoin mining. And so if the Bitcoin price pumps, 10% in a day, it's not like it's like, oh, let's go add 10%, to our operation. It's like, um, to add 10% to our operation, it will take this many months and years. It's like, so when we look at the data of how has Bitcoin mining grown over the past 6 months, not by a lot. In Texas, it's basically, I believe that it's gone from 2.6 to 2.8 gigawatts, which is it's just an increase of 200 megawatts, which, I mean, to some people, I guess, So anyway, but that's a distraction because ultimately his argument is that if we add lots of gigawatts to the grid of Bitcoin mining, that this is going to contribute to peak load. And that's actually demonstrably false. All of the scientific data from academia shows the diametric opposite, that Bitcoin miners are actually negatively correlated with peak load. They load shed because peak load is the cause of high prices in the real-time electricity wholesale market. And if peak load is not causing high prices and not causing Bitcoin miners to turn off, your grid has a much bigger problem because it is dysfunctional in the sense that price signals are not reflecting physical reality of the grid. And that is a failure mode, and you need to fix the regulatory framework around your grid, the marketplace structure of your grid to accommodate that. ERCOT does not have that problem. ERCOT is actually, I would say, at the forefront of integrating large flexible loads with the grid and doing so in a way that is really helping balance the grid and is a tremendous public benefit, not at all a public harm in any way. It's not even reasonably likely. And so it's reasonably likely that it's a public benefit. I would argue that it's just beyond any reasonable doubt, just based on the evidence that exists out there. And that's why we decided Riot and Texas Blockchain Council, which represents a lot of Texas miners, and the Digital Chamber of Commerce, which represents Bitcoin miners nationally. From our perspective, this process of declaring a fake emergency in order to avoid public notice and comment, in order to avoid any kind of transparency and feedback, was not appropriate. And that ultimately what would best serve policymakers would be to follow the law, which is to do public notice and comment. And unfortunately, the Biden administration did not see it that way. So as a last resort, we did have to sue them in federal court in the Western District of Texas. So the Honorable Judge Alan Albright is kind of the federal judge that is there in Waco, Texas, famous for a number of different reasons. And the really, the reason why we were in Waco with Judge Albright was because Riot has one of the largest Bitcoin mining facilities in the world, not far from Waco, in a beautiful town called Rockdale that has really fresh air. It's not Rockland, which is what the New York Times thought it was, but it is Rockdale. And there we have our facility, so that basically kind of establishes where it makes sense to do the lawsuit. And we filed this the day before the survey was due. We just didn't have a lot of time. The EIA was really in a, I want to say metaphorical sense, but it's not really that metaphorical. Is that they put a gun to our head of, hey, if you don't fill this out, you're going to go to prison, you're going to pay fines, which is pretty insane way of working with folks. I think they should try to be more professional than that. And so we took it to federal court and we said, hey, can we please get a temporary restraining order? Right? These people are stalking us. They're trying to invade our privacy. We need a TRO, a restraining order, to like keep them away from us. Right? They need to. We need the court to establish some order here because these people are acting completely illegally. Right? And our lawsuit. I really recommend people to read it if they're interested in the law because there were a tremendous number of crimes committed by the government in putting together this survey, and so in any case, the judge immediately granted our temporary restraining order because I think that I don't want to speak for him, but based on what he wrote in the official court document, he seems to have pretty quickly come to the conclusion that Texas Blockchain Council and Riot really are victims of government overreach and just total lawlessness by this Biden administration, that they violated several statutes and just were operating. They'd gone rogue, basically. They weren't, in any way performing the duties that they'd sworn to perform.
It's clear that the government has no problem breaking the law when it suits them, so if you want to protect your Bitcoin from unlawful seizure, head to bitbox.swiss/Walker and use the promo code Walker for 5% off the Bitcoin-only BitBox02 hardware wallet. Then, use that BitBox02 to get your Bitcoin off the exchange and into your own self-custody. The BitBox02 is easy as hell to use whether you're new to Bitcoin or a seasoned psychopath. It is Bitcoin only, it is fully open source, and you can head to their GitHub and check for yourself. There's no need to trust me. Plus, when you go to bitbox.swiss/Walker and use promo code Walker, not only do you get 5% off, but you also help support this fucking podcast. So thank you.
So after that, the judge set a hearing for Wednesday of this week. As we approached the hearing, it got canceled, and it was announced that an agreement had been reached. And then today, on Friday, the agreement was, published publicly. And basically, what the agreement is that the government is going to destroy any data that they received from this illegal survey, and that they're going to start over and actually follow the law, right, of doing public notice and comment, not pulling the fire alarm when there's no fire, right, not crying wolf when there's no wolf. They have to cut that, so they're cutting that out. They're not doing that anymore. They're following the law, and they're paying attorney's fees, right, because of the inconvenience that they created for through their terrible approach to policy in this area. And I think that it's a tremendous win on a number of different levels. On a very practical level, it's really important for us to provide lots of comments to steer kind of the direction in which any kind of mining survey should go in, because I actually do think that there's a really great story of demand response that this survey could unearth, and show how Bitcoin mining is a key part of the energy transition. So I think that there's a really positive story here, but we have to make sure that the survey is crafted in a way that gets both the benefits and the risks, right? If we only focus on kind of the costs and the risks, then we miss the benefits. So that, I think, is a practical reason for why we need to have the opportunity to provide comments before being forced by law to have a mandatory survey. Two is that there's no emergency, right? I mean, look, Elizabeth Warren has been pushing this for 2 years, right? So just let's look at reality here, which is that there's no emergency. If there was an emergency, then there would already be public harm, right? There would already be something bad happening. I don't even know, blackouts, right? ERCOT, look, I think here's the main problem that they have with the emergency argument, which is that ERCOT is not going to connect a load that can cause public harm, right? They would be in legal trouble if they did that, right? That is negligence on their part, and so that just wouldn't happen. Now, I also think that it's a win from a regulatory perspective that it's really important for all of the regulators in the United States to understand that Bitcoin miners are industry stakeholders like any other industry stakeholders, right? So you have to approach it that way. If you approach it, through a dogmatic lens of, hey, I don't like Bitcoin, only criminals use Bitcoin, Bitcoin miners are criminals, and therefore I'm going to just break every law. I'm going to commit the worst crimes possible to prove that they are criminals. It's like, that's really going to get you wrecked in federal court, right? You have to follow the law, even if you think Bitcoin miners are criminals. And we're not. And so due to the fact that we're not criminals, you're really going to have a lot of trouble with the fact patterns as they get laid out in federal court. So rather than ending up having to pay for attorney's fees for Bitcoin miners due to your just ideological craziness, just accept that Bitcoin miners are an industry stakeholder like any other. Treat us with whatever respect you would treat a solar farm or a battery manufacturer, right? Like, we're all part of the energy transition. And so I think that we got to work together. And so Bitcoin miners are not opposed in principle to transparency and to doing surveys and to having a collaborative working relationship with regulators. What we are opposed to is we're opposed to crime, really, is what we're opposed to. So in this case, crimes were committed. We're opposed to that. We'll take you to federal court if you commit crimes. So I think that's reasonable.
I would say it's highly reasonable. And first of all, congratulations on the restraining order and the victory here, because it's not just a victory for miners, it's a victory for, I think, Americans in general, because we have rule of law in the United States, or we're supposed to. We are not going to continue functioning in the way that we have been pretty successfully on the world stage if that rule of law breaks down, because the rule of law is at its most fundamental level. The purpose of the law is to organize for the collective defense of private property, not to throw innumerable onerous forms at somebody until they bend the knee and shut down their operations because you don't happen to like what they do because you got some bad information from your staff. So congratulations for that, and thank you for going to bat on behalf of the American people.